Hello and welcome. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Tonight, President Muhammadu Buhari meets with security chiefs in an effort to end insecurity and the spate of killings across the country. Federal Airports Authority reopens Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport runway after a private jet skidded off the runway earlier in the day. Senate orders Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation to clear fuel queues across the country within 7 days. And Liberia's new President George Weah begins tenure with sweeping changes in the running of the government.
On Business News tonight, Nigeria's Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo says the federal government plans to establish prudence in financial spending across ministries, departments and agencies. On sports news, the Nigeria Football Federation, the NFF, contracts Swedish coach Thomas Dernaby to take the role of the head coach of the 8-time African champions, the Super Falcons, until 2020.
And from Abuja, Power Works and Housing Minister Babatunde Fashola disagrees with lawmakers over allegations of fraud in the award of 42 billion naira contract.
We begin tonight at the presidential villa in the nation's capital, where President Muhammadu Buhari today met with the nation's security chiefs as part of efforts aimed at ending the spate of attacks and insecurity across the country. The meeting, which held behind closed doors, lasted several hours, and some of the issues that came up for discussion are the conditions given by the United States for the sale of 12 warplanes and weapons worth $495 million to the federal government. President Buhari also met with some state governors behind closed doors. After the meeting, the Minister of Defense in a statement expressed the need for security agencies to tackle the dissemination of hate speech through the social media by some prominent Nigerians.
The remote course is part of the grazing route. Hereby we are in this country, right from independence, there are cleared routes where people pass. The issue of arms is all over. In that killing you are talking about, there are also militias that they also did the killing. Some people were caught with arms and they call themselves forest guard or whatever with AK. There is nowhere in this country where arms are allowed to be carried apart from legitimate security forces. So anybody that is carrying any arm is illegal. Militias were caught in the same land doing the same killing. So the killing is not done by any particular group. It's a communal issue. Minister of Defense with the Foreign Affairs Minister and American Ambassador will sit down and reduce some of those conditions. However, the payment was given, deadline for the payment was given at 20th February this year. So we have agreed it will be paid, but the conditions will be looked into.
Meanwhile, the President will be attending the 30th Ordinary Session of the Assemblies of Heads of State and Government of the African Union in Addis Ababa on Friday. African leaders will be discussing the fight against corruption at the event, and President Muhammadu Buhari has been selected to talk on the theme, Winning the Fight Against Corruption, a Sustainable Path to Africa's Transformation. A statement from the spokesperson to the President on Media and Publicity, Femi Adesina, says this is the first time in the African Union's 54-year history that corruption will form the theme of the gathering. Mr. Adesina says, quote, President Buhari was unanimously picked by the regional leaders to champion the fight against corruption on the continent in recognition of his personal commitment and widely acclaimed anti-graft drive at the domestic level, end of quote. Besides corruption, other issues lined up for consideration by African leaders include peace and security, free movement of persons, climate change, trade, aviation, education, gender and development. An SOS is being sent out by the President's Humanitarian Assistance Program to the effect that poor funding has been hampering the implementation of the program aimed at rebuilding the Northeast. That distress call coming from the Presidential Committee on the Northeast Initiative says of the 45 billion naira budgeted for the project in 2017, only 10 billion was released.
Spurred by the urgent need to address the devastating effect of Boko Haram activities in the Northeast, President Buhari inaugurated the Presidential Committee of the Northeast in 2016. The committee is to oversee all remedial programs aimed at rebuilding the region. 1 year after the program was inaugurated, members of the committee converged on this hall in Abuja to appraise the level of implementation.
The PCNI's Coordination Forum has consistently brought together diverse stakeholders to address these complex and dynamic challenges. As such, we recognize monitoring and evaluation as central to our success to coordinate for recovery, monitoring progress and challenges of recovery.
The head of the Humanitarian Assistance, Rehabilitation and Resettlement Department outlines the successes and challenges of the intervention.
We've been able to do very well also in the areas of rapid health deployment. As we speak, we are deploying medical outreach missions, across the northeastern state, the northeast states. Like I said at the beginning, we also have our challenges. For example, in 2017, out of the 45 billion, that is budgeted for the northeast, so far we've been able to receive, in the neighborhood of just 10 million.
However, some development partners want the military to provide more security and help to increase access to some affected communities in the region.
We do recognize the heavy presence of military right now. There have been quite a number of reports, and I can acknowledge that they have happened. There has been, and in those areas where there are military presence, we are still not ready to go there until we get the clear green light. So I don't have the name exactly, but there were 2 LGAs that were still being worked on, and the military had said in the course of the year they should be able to have full access to them.
5 states in the northeast, including Bauchi, Gombe, Yobe, Adamawa and Borno, are targeted for the rebuilding initiatives of the federal government. But the resurgence of attacks in some communities in the region now pose a serious challenge to the full implementation of the programs.
Another group in dire need of humanitarian assistance is the internally displaced people in Benue State, especially residents of 4 IDP camps in Logo and Goma local government areas. While on a visit to the IDPs, Governor Samuel Ortom gave them the assurance of increased surveillance along the Benue-Nasarawa corridors to prevent further attacks by the suspected herdsmen. The governor's assurance is coming against the backdrop of another reported killing of 1 person yesterday by a suspected herdsman who invaded a village in Goma.
Over 23,000 displaced people are gathered here at the Ugba IDP camp in Logo area of Benue State, comprising more of women and children who've lost their loved ones. The people carry on with their lives, and perhaps oblivious to the environmental hazards they're exposed to. The state governor, Samuel Ortom, arrives at the camp bearing good news regarding the security of their communities.
As directed by Mr. President, they are cooperating with me, and we're doing surveillance and ensuring that we block the other areas where there are leakages, so that once that is done, you can go back to your respective homes. Once we secure the land and we're sure that you'll be secured when you go back.
While the displaced persons had challenges they face, the governor came prepared with solutions.
We don't have the food, we don't have the place where I defecate. There's no toilet here and not a good water to drink. Even to bath, we don't have water here.
I have directed and I've already released money that they should sink a borehole right away in this place to provide water.
From the internally displaced persons camp in Logo to others in Guma local government area, the Benue state government is not only providing them with boreholes, but basic food and clothing items until when it's safe for them to return home.
The committee set up by the All Progressives Congress to look into the issue of restructuring has recommended the creation of state police and called for devolution of powers to states. Now, part of the recommendations submitted by the chairman of the committee and Governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, is the police and prisons be moved from the exclusive to the concurrent list.
And minerals, including oil fields, oil mining, geological surveys, and natural gas. This should be moved to the concurrent list. Mr. Chairman, this is a major recommendation because if this amendment that we are proposing is passed, it means that all minerals, including oil and gas, that are onshore will be vested in the states of the Federation. However, all offshore oil shall remain absolutely vested in the government of the Federation. Police, we've also moved to the concurrent list. In effect, Mr. Chairman, we are recommending that policing should be both federal and state. So we will have state police for certain crimes as well as federal police for certain crimes or interstate crimes. Though there was no consensus from stakeholders on the merger of states, we felt that we should propose a bill that allows states to merge, and it's up to the party, the National Assembly, and the people of Nigeria to decide on that. But we've drafted a bill that is there for the party and the government to move on to. We also have recommendations on fiscal federalism and revenue allocation, in which we've proposed amending Section 162 and subsection 2 of the Constitution, as well as amend the Revenue Allocation of Revenue Federation Account, etc. Act to give more revenues to the states away and reduce the federal government share of revenues. We've also recommended, based on what we heard from Nigerians, for prisons to be moved from the exclusive list to the concurrent list. Most of the prisons in Nigeria historically were owned by the local governments, native authorities, and the state government. They were just taken over by the federal government after the military coup of 1966. We are recommending a reversal to the state of play as at 1966, but with the additional responsibility for the federal government to continue to have federal prisons where we can have state prisons.
The Senate has issued a 7-day ultimatum to the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation to ensure adequate supply of petrol nationwide and clear the lingering fuel queues across the country. The decision was taken after the upper chamber adopted the report of the Joint Senate and House of Representatives Committee on Petroleum presented at plenary. Our correspondent Linda Akibe reports.
Sells at the control price till today.
This is the second time this year that the Senate is discussing the lingering fuel scarcity situation in the country. Despite an earlier intervention by the upper chamber early in January 2018, fuel queues still persist at several stations across the country. The Senate and House committees on petroleum downstream have been meeting with NNPC officials and other industry experts to unravel the reasons for the persistent queues and find solutions to the problem.
On what happened, on the reasons why the queues were back, they told us that the combined issues still of supply gap, coupled with massive smuggling across our borders, which is quite alarming, Mr. President. Resolutions on fuel scarcity. The Joint Committee on Petroleum Resources, Senate and the House of Representatives, acting on the mandate of the leadership of the National Assembly, met on Wednesday, January 24, 2018, and resolved as follows. 1. Direct the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, to ensure adequate supply of premium motor spirit, otherwise known as petrol, and disappearance of queues at our petrol stations nationwide within 7 days. 2. Direct the Nigerian Customs, Police, Army, Air Force, Navy, Civil Defense, and Department of State Security Services to ensure effective border control to curb smuggling of petroleum products to our neighboring countries.
I presume that definitely the substantive report is still coming. I think you just bring this to our attention for us to know where you are, and more importantly, to be clear to NNPC that they must go and make sure that these queues that exist disappear on a timeline which you have given me 7 days. We take note of that, and we hope that by next week you will have your report.
The Senate has directed its Committee on Petroleum Downstream to report back to plenary next week to ensure that the NNPC has complied with its directives. Linda Kibe, Channels Television News.
In part 2, after the break, former INEC chairman Professor Atahiru Jega warns of the need to creatively manage Nigeria's unemployed youths ahead of the 2019 poll to avoid a social crisis. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.